We're largely going to focus on that pre-candidate time. I call that the money, the business, the brand.
President Biden's brother is set to testify later behind closed doors about the hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of business dealings, international business dealings, that the Biden family acquired with the president's son, Hunter. James Biden, who also goes by Jim, is set to testify before the House Oversight Committee. Republicans are continuing with their investigation, which could ultimately lead to an effort to impeach President Biden. Joining me now with the latest is my friend and colleague, The Hill's Julia Manchester, host of What's America Thinking. Julia, what are Republicans going to be looking for with regards to the hearing?
Well, Kevin, essentially what Republicans want to find is something that can, back an impeachment push. I think Republicans are under so much pressure to really get this show on the road, and they're going the route of what they say is the Biden crime family. So they're starting out with his brother. Now, unclear whether they'll find anything here, but it's interesting to see how they've obviously started with Hunter Biden, and now they're sort of expanding that scope. But I still think Hunter Biden is very much the center of this.
So where does it ultimately lead to? I mean, there's international business dealings with Russia, China, other countries. I mean, doing work abroad is not necessarily illegal. So what is the actual issue here that the Oversight Committee is looking at? Or do we not know yet? Is it just an open investigation?
Well, maybe a little bit of both, Kevin. I think right now, Republicans need to, in order to make their case, they want to find a link, President Biden using his influence as vice president to try to conduct these business deals that could have been carried out by his family, or that's what Republicans are alleging. The problem for Republicans is they haven't been able to make that link. There's really no concrete evidence of that yet. So I think they're probably hoping to start with James Biden in that case.
So, I mean, no one on Capitol Hill, I remember, 10 years ago when someone would say the word impeachment, it carried such weight. And from your analytical standpoint, just in your coverage of Washington, how has impeachment and the issue of impeachment really diminished over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Kevin. Impeachment has become a political football. I think going back to when Bill Clinton was obviously impeached, and before that, whenever the term was floated around, impeachment was serious. That meant that you did something wrong and you were going to be held accountable. Not saying it's not serious now, but it's much more political. Whereas you had Democrats during the Trump administration impeaching the former president twice. And then you had Republicans coming back and saying, essentially, they're going to take that precedent and use it against Biden and Biden administration officials. So last week, we saw Republicans impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. We know that was essentially a political slap on the wrist because Republicans did that knowing full well that once it goes to the Senate, he's not going to, be convicted. So it's become this political football that's going to probably start to go back and forth from each administration, each Congress. And I think it's lost its weight going forward.
Well, yeah, the institution of Congress and what it means to be a lawmaker has really taken a hit in recent years. And that's my final question on this topic. Is this going to backfire against Republicans if they actually pursue this impeachment?
I think it could backfire against them maybe the same way Republicans would argue it backfired against, Democrats and their efforts to impeach former President Trump. Whereas in the next administration, whoever that is, you could see the opposing party, pursue impeachment. So I think it creates a political headache. And it's, you think it's a political win, but at the end of the day, it's a lose-lose scenario because you have Congress continuing to be unproductive, but focused on this issue of impeachment. And it just seems like it's a very vicious cycle that we find ourselves in.
And not talking about foreign aid for Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine. And While all of this is going on, former President Donald Trump compared the death of Putin opposition leader Alexei Navalny to his own legal troubles. He made that remark on Fox News. What's been the reaction to that specific comment?
I think it has a lot of people scratching their heads. Remember, it took President Trump a long time to publicly acknowledge Navalny's death. In fact, it was announced he died on Friday. And then on Saturday, he was at Philadelphia at SneakerCon, sort of a more lighthearted event, still didn't say anything. Whereas you had Nikki Haley and Joe Biden talking about Navalny. But look, I guess for Trump supporters, they're going to, eat that up and believe him and appreciate that sentiment. But going forward, I don't see how it necessarily helps him or maybe hinders him. I think it gives fodder to Nikki Haley and Joe Biden, but I think a lot of voters looking at that might roll their eyes and say, that's another comparison. But on a more serious note, I think it could be concerning to some of NATO allies and people who are concerned about the issue of Russia and Navalny's death from a foreign policy standpoint.
It was just yesterday I was speaking with a source who said directly that Vladimir Putin has actually said Poland's next after Ukraine. It's in the transcript. It's on film. And so Vladimir Putin has been very crystal clear in terms of what his longer term ambitions are. And so the forecasting from politicians, whether it's ambiguous or whether it's diminishing the value of what I saw one recent poll that has more than the vast overwhelming majority of Americans supporting NATO. It's really, really striking. And speaking of, you mentioned Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley says she's not getting out of this thing. Even after Saturday's Republican South Carolina primary, which she's expected to lose, former governor of the state. So what's her play here? Why is she hanging on?
To quote the great sage Taylor Swift, we don't know what her quote unquote end game is going forward. She's hired staff in Super Tuesday states. I think there is this knowledge and this logic that maybe in a state like Virginia or Michigan, you have more moderate Republicans, more independents participating. But at the same time, we know that this game is all about momentum. And if she loses South Carolina badly, there's a question about that momentum going forward. But Kevin, watching that speech yesterday she gave from South Carolina, it was remarkable in many ways. She was extremely defiant, very firm, and at one point even got emotional talking about her husband and relating it to Trump's comments about her husband who was serving in the military abroad. So it really goes to show how personal this is for Nikki Haley and really how invested in it. We don't know what the ultimate goal is. For her, she says it's the nomination, but she, in the case it's not the nomination, she says, well, I'm not running for Veep stakes. I'm not laying the groundwork for 2028, but we'll have to see.
The Never Trumpers have never been organized, to be blunt. And so the reporting that I've done, and Julie, I'd be curious if your reporting matches this. There's this sense that Haley's playing for the post-Republican Never Trump movement to be the standard bearer of whatever that coalition looks like. There's some who would argue that the Republican Party is not going to exist after Trump. I don't buy that. Trump has never had more of the party behind him than he does now. You're seeing that even in Congress and in the jockeying going on to be McConnell's successor. But in contrast to that, should you believe the notion of the Denver Rigglemans, the Liz Cheneys, the Jeff Flakes, the Paul Ryans, then that orbit, they were looking for some type of leader. Whether or not they mount a campaign or not, that remains to be seen. But Nikki Haley, it seems, would be the natural person to fill that role, no?
I think you're absolutely right. And that's what I've been hearing, because if she's ruling out running for, VP or if she's ruling out, doing this for 2028, and we obviously know that politicians oftentimes go back on their word, but I've, been hearing that could be potentially in the works. I haven't heard that from Haley's camp. They say she's focused on the Republican Party and winning the Republican nomination. But I think it's fair to point out that the Republican Party is Trump's party now. And, I don't know if there's necessarily a place for Nikki Haley in that party. So, the next logical step, I guess, from my point of view, is she continues to challenge Trump, but sort of, maybe the Never Trump movement tries to galvanize around her. The question is, can they get enough support from Republicans and moderates and, from the different political umbrellas?
One place she's not going to be going is CPAC, but rumor has it that you are going to CPAC. No? What are you
I will be in and out of CPAC.
I feel like you might notice some Trump high top sneakers there. Or they're not out yet, but keep us posted on that.
Yeah, no, I'll look for the Trump high top sneakers, maybe some of the MAGA hats. But I feel like in Iowa, it was all about the white Trump hats.
Yes.
So the white trucker
gold.
hats. So I'm curious to see what the fashion is.
Yeah, well, if you get a whiff of the new Trump cologne, be sure to let me know. Appreciate that. Julia Manchester, host of What's America Thinking on The Hill TV, my friend and colleague, The Hill's Julia Manchester. Thanks, Jules.
Thanks, Kevin.
The Biden administration is set to unveil a major sanctions package against Moscow later this week. The move comes in response to the death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny in a Russian penal colony. In a call with reporters earlier, National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby said that the sanctions are going to hold Russia accountable for all of its actions over the course of this vicious and brutal war that has now raged on for 2 years. Additionally, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that the sanctions will target the Russian defense industrial base and sources of revenue for the Russian economy that power Russia's war machine. Queen Bee has gone country, and it is a great song. Beyoncé's new single, Texas Hold'em, has been on repeat for this guy. It debuted at #1 on Billboard's Hot Country Songs chart. This comes after a country music station in Oklahoma declined to play Beyoncé's new song after it was requested. Now, they have since played it after saying that they did not intentionally realize the song was released, but Billboard says that Beyoncé is the only other solo woman alongside Taylor Swift to achieve the #1 status with no accompanying artist. Remarkable. It's a great song. It's very catchy. It's very, very catchy. If you haven't listened, go take a listen. That's it for today's Daily Debrief. My name is Kevin Cirilli. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.